The Marine base was quiet that afternoon, the kind of silence that only comes after a long training day. The sun had started dipping behind the horizon, and most of the young Marines were laughing in the barracks, cleaning their weapons or scrolling through their phones. But near the far end of the range, sitting on a wooden bench beside a dusty Humvee, an old man was cleaning an M40 sniper rifle with the kind of care that spoke of experience, decades of it. His movements were slow but precise, his hands steady despite the wrinkles that told of many years spent under the sun and in the smoke of battle. A few younger Marines passing by gave him curious looks. No one recognized him. Some assumed he was just an old armorer or a retired trainer visiting the base. But when the Marine commander, Colonel David Henson, stepped out of his office and saw the scene, something about the old man caught his attention. He stopped walking. The way the man handled that rifle, it wasn't casual and it wasn't for show. It was muscle memory. The same kind of rhythm you only earn after years in the field. Henson began walking closer, curious. The light breeze lifted the old man's cap slightly, revealing a head of silver, gray hair, and a weathered face. His uniform jacket, old and faded, lay folded neatly beside him. On its sleeve an insignia, a patch that made Henson's heart skip a beat. It was the emblem of the 1st Recon Battalion, a legendary Marine unit that had seen some of the hardest combat in Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan. But that wasn't what froze the commander. Below the Recon patch was another, smaller one that almost no one wore anymore. It was the insignia of a secret detachment known only by a few senior officers. A unit disbanded decades ago after a mission that had become the stuff of whispers and classified reports. Henson froze in his tracks, his mind racing back to what he'd read once in the classified archives. That unit, Shadow Recon, was composed of elite snipers trained for missions that didn't officially exist. Their operations were so secret that even the Pentagon rarely admitted they happened. The last man recorded from that unit had gone missing in action in 1983. Yet here he was, sitting calmly on a bench, cleaning an M40 like it was another day in the field. Henson approached slowly. "Sir, may I ask where you got that patch?" The old man didn't look up at first. He continued polishing the rifle's bolt, his voice low and steady. "Earned it a long time ago, son, before most of you were born." Henson stepped closer, studying his face. "You served with Shadow Recon." The old man finally looked up. His eyes were sharp, pale blue, and filled with the kind of memories that men carried only after seeing too much. "Served?" He gave a faint smile. "I built it." For a moment, Henson didn't know what to say. His throat went dry. He had read the reports, the legends, the names. There was one name that stood above them all: Master Gunnery Sergeant Walter Briggs, the man who had trained the first generation of Marine snipers to operate deep behind enemy lines. Officially declared KIA during a covert mission in Beirut, his body was never found. "You're," Henson began, but the old man raised a hand. "Just a ghost, son. That's what the Corps said, right?" He chuckled softly and returned to cleaning the rifle. Each stroke of the cloth slow, deliberate. Been keeping her clean. Old habits die hard. Around them, a few Marines had started gathering, sensing something was happening. They whispered to each other, eyes darting between the commander and the mysterious old man. Henson knelt beside him, looking at the rifle. "That's an M40A1 Vietnam era. How do you still have that?" Briggs nodded. "Carried her through 2 wars and a dozen places you'll never find on a map. She's older than some of your men, but she still hits straight." He paused, then glanced at the commander. "You ever take a shot past 1-200 yards?" "Once," Henson said quietly, "at Camp Pendleton, training exercise. Wind was brutal." Briggs smiled faintly. "Try 1-700 yards, crosswind, 40 knots, on a hillside in the middle of the jungle. 1 shot. Target never knew what hit him." The Marines around them fell silent. The commander could see it now. The way the man held the weapon, the confidence in his tone, the presence. It wasn't arrogance, it was experience, the kind of calm that came from surviving everything. Why come back now? Henson asked finally. After all these years, Briggs exhaled, the sound half sigh, half reflection. I wanted to see what became of the core, the young ones, the new blood, wanted to see if they still had the fire we did. He looked around at the curious faces, smiling faintly. Seems like they do. Then he pulled a small folded paper from his jacket pocket and handed it to Henson. That's the coordinates of something I left buried out east. Training notes, logs. Maybe someone will learn something from them. The Corps should have them, not me. Henson took it reverently, unsure what to say. You're a legend, sir, he said finally. Briggs shook his head. Legends die with the men who make them. I'm just a Marine, same as the rest. He reassembled the rifle with smooth, practiced motions, slung it over his shoulder, and stood. The commander rose with him. For a moment, they stood face to face, past and present, 2 generations of warriors bound by one code. Briggs extended his hand. Take care of them, Colonel. They're good men. Henson shook his hand firmly. Always. The old man nodded, put on his cap, and began walking toward the gate. The setting sun painted his shadow long across the ground. The Marines watched in silence as he disappeared beyond the fence, his figure fading into the orange horizon. No one followed, no one spoke. When Henson looked down at the patch again, his heart pounded. The Shadow Recon insignia, black skull with crossed rifles, wasn't supposed to exist anymore. But on that day, at that base, the legend had walked among them once more. The air around the Marine Corps base hung heavy with the scent of oil, dust, and gunpowder. The training range had gone quiet, most of the younger Marines heading back to their quarters after a long day of drills. But near the far side of the compound, just beyond the rows of Humvees, an old man sat alone on a bench, wiping down an M40 sniper rifle with the kind of care that only comes from years of knowing exactly what that weapon can do. His movements were slow but precise, the kind that revealed discipline etched into muscle memory. The fading sun painted his silver hair gold, and for a moment he looked like a ghost from another time, someone who didn't belong in this modern base filled with digital gear and eager young faces. A few Marines passed by, whispering, curious who the stranger was. His jacket, folded neatly beside him, bore patches so faded that only a trained eye could make them out. To the untrained, he was just another veteran visiting his past. But when Colonel James Harlan, the base commander, stepped out of the operations tent, his eyes caught something that made him stop mid-stride. The way that old man handled the M40. It wasn't nostalgia. It was instinct. That rifle wasn't just being cleaned. It was being honored. Harlan squinted, his curiosity turning into a quiet unease. He walked closer, his boots crunching against the gravel. When the old man looked up, the colonel caught a glimpse of the patch on the jacket sleeve. His breath caught in his throat. It was the insignia of the 3rd Recon Battalion, but just below it, stitched in worn thread, was another patch. One that shouldn't exist anymore. A black skull with crossed rifles and a Latin motto that only a handful of men in Marine history had ever earned the right to wear. The insignia of Ghost Reaper Unit, a covert Marine sniper division from the Vietnam and Cold War era, disbanded decades ago after missions that were buried under redacted files and national secrecy. Where did you get that patch? Harlan asked, his tone steady but cautious. The old man didn't look up at first. He continued polishing the rifle's bolt, voice calm, deliberate. Earned it, he said softly, a lifetime ago. The colonel stepped closer. You served in Ghost Reaper. The old man smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried both pride and pain. Served in it, he said, finally raising his eyes. They were sharp, blue, and filled with memories that didn't fade. Son, I built it. For a moment, the colonel felt the world tilt. That couldn't be true. The founder of Ghost Reaper, the man known only by his call sign Hawk, was presumed dead during an off-book operation in Beirut in 1983. No body was ever recovered. Every record said he never came back. Yet here he was, sitting in front of him, alive, cleaning a rifle that history had already buried. "You're Hawk," the colonel whispered. The old man chuckled. "Used to be," he said, setting the bolt aside. "Now I'm just a name no one remembers, and that's how it's supposed to be." The colonel crouched beside him, looking at the weapon. "That's the M40A1, isn't it? You still keep it, and never let go," Hawk said, running a cloth over the barrel. "She's not just steel and glass, she's a part of me. Every scratch on her tells a story, every dent's got a name." He glanced at the colonel, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You ever take a long shot, Colonel?" "Qualified at 1,200 yards once," Harlan replied. Hawk smiled thinly. "Try 1750, crosswind 40 knots, target behind cover, heart shot." He paused, his gaze distant, as if the memory was right there, just beyond the sunset. "Did it once in the jungle, saved 6 men that day." The younger Marines who had gathered nearby fell silent. They could sense it now. This wasn't just an old man. This was a legend walking among them. Harlan felt a mix of awe and reverence. "Why come back after all these years?" he asked quietly. Hawk leaned back, the faintest sigh escaping him. "Wanted to see if the Corps still had heart," he said. "Wanted to see if the young ones still carried that fire in their eyes. You can teach tactics, discipline, shooting, but you can't teach heart. Either you've got it, or you don't." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. "Here," he said, handing it to the colonel. "Coordinates, there's a cache out there in the Nevada desert. Logs, maps, training notes, everything the Ghost Reapers learned before they shut us down. It's not for me anymore, it's for them," he said, nodding toward the watching Marines. "The Corps deserves its own history back." Harlan took the paper carefully, understanding the weight of what he was holding. "Sir," he said with respect, "you've given more than anyone could ever repay." Hawk shook his head. "Don't thank me. Just make sure the next generation remembers why we fight, not for glory, not for medals, but for the man standing next to you." He began reassembling the rifle, his hands moving with quiet grace. When the last piece clicked into place, he slung it over his shoulder and stood back straight, eyes forward. For a moment, time seemed to blur. The old Marine stood there like a shadow out of history, the sun dipping low behind him, painting the ground in long, golden stripes. Harlan stood too, offering a salute. Hawk returned it, sharp and precise. "Take care of them, Colonel," he said. "They're your brothers now. Never forget that." "Yes, sir," Harlan said firmly, his voice thick with emotion. Hawk gave one final nod, then turned and began walking toward the perimeter road, his boots crunching softly on the gravel. The Marines watched in absolute silence as his figure grew smaller and smaller, until it vanished beyond the gate. No one spoke, no one moved. When Harlan finally looked down, he realized the old man had left something on the bench. A single brass casing, polished to a shine, with the words engraved along its rim, "Ghosts never die." The colonel picked it up, holding it in his palm as the last rays of sunlight faded. Somewhere beyond the hills, the echo of the old sniper's footsteps lingered like a memory that refused to be forgotten. That evening, as darkness settled over the base, every Marine on that range knew they had seen something they would tell their children about, something that wasn't in the manuals or the records. The day the commander saw an old man cleaning his M40 rifle and froze, not because of the weapon, but because of the patch that told a story no one dared to speak aloud. The patch of a legend who refused to die,